Hello. I am about to read an article by Declan Waugh, Irish environmental scientist, and it's called Evidence-Based Medical Science Used to End Policy of Fluoridation of Drinking Water in the Netherlands. So I'll read it out for you now. This is a summary of information compiled from public record and published peer-reviewed journals on the history of fluoridation in the Netherlands. It explains how medical-based science resulted in the termination of fluoridation in this country, thanks largely to Dr. Hans Muhlenberg, a medical physician, cancer specialist, and clinical ecologist who, with a team of medical doctors and medical researchers, conclusively demonstrated that fluoridation of drinking water resulted in the population being subjected to low-grade poisoning by fluoride with wide-ranging medical side effects. Hans C. Muhlenberg, MD, graduated as a medical doctor from the University of Leiden in 1952. He was a general practitioner in the city of Haarlem in the Netherlands since April 1953. Apart from being a GP, his main interests were clinical ecology and complementary forms of cancer treatment. Dr. Muhlenberg wrote 3 books on the subject of fluoridation. 2 of these are in Dutch, W. 1973, and Fluoride in 1990. The 3rd book is in English, Fluoride, The Freedom Fight, 1987. Dr. Muhlenberg was actively involved in the campaign to end fluoridation in the Netherlands and spent many years researching the science surrounding fluoridation. In 1952, Dutch health authorities, following the lead of the United States, began fluoridating the public water supply in the city of Tiel, with Culemborg as the control city. In 1971, Dr. Muhlenberg documented the first fluoride victim in Holland during the Haarlem hearings regarding fluoridation. The case involved a baby boy from nearby fluoridated Velsen, who had breathing trouble since birth. When the child was 6 months old, he was brought to Dr. Muhlenberg for treatment and was completely cured in 1 week of its ailment simply by removing exposure to fluoride in the drinking water. On March 20th, 1972, the city of Amsterdam began fluoridating its water supplies. This had a widespread effect on surrounding communities who derived their drinking water from the Amsterdam water suppliers, such as Heemstede, Bennebroek, Hoofddorp, Haarlemmerlied, and many others. Dr. Muhlenberg found himself in a unique position to study the effects of fluoridation firsthand, as half of his practice lay in Heemstede, which was fluoridated, and the other half in Haarlem, non-fluoridated. As he had already extensively studied the possible side effects of fluoridated water from the mainly American literature, Dr. Muhlenberg was on the lookout for changes in the morbidity pattern in his practice. According to Dr. Muhlenberg, it soon became apparent that the extensive American data showing adverse effects were accurate. This is in quotation marks. The adverse health effects began almost at once, with people, especially children, developing colicky pains. The parents of these children often did not even know that their water supplies were fluoridated. These sudden changes only took place in fluoridated Heemstede, and the cure was easy: non-fluoridated water. This cure was shown repeatedly to be the correct one, as parents made errors with the jerry cans of non-fluoridated water. As soon as fluoridated water was given, be it only 1 cup, the sensitive children began to yell again. This was particularly stressful in babies, who often yelled through the whole night. Other early symptoms were the small ulcers in the mouth called stomatitis aftosa. I also saw how children with a known allergic condition that had been under control, such as children with atopic eczema suddenly saw a return of their complaints. End of quotation marks. Based upon this experience in his own practice, Dr. Muhlenberg organized a group of practitioners and researchers to study the effects of fluoridation on health. All the doctors came from fluoridated communities, and many did not believe in the existence of the side effects, as the health authorities had emphatically denied their existence. In addition to the original 12 physicians practicing in Haarlem and some of its surrounding fluoridated areas, various individuals with training in biology, chemistry, and neurology also participated in the above study. After unblinded tests on skeptical general practitioners, which showed negative health effects similar to low-grade poisoning, to evaluate our initial findings, they conducted a double-blind experiment. To obtain unassailable proof that nothing but fluoride in the water was responsible and that the ill effects were not imaginary, Dr. Muhlenberg's group turned to a double-blind procedure. A cooperating pharmacist prepared 8 numbered bottles of drinking water, some with fluoride, some without. Only the pharmacist knew which ones contained fluoride. The numbers, placed in a sealed envelope, were sent to the group's attorney. Patients who had recovered from side effects after changing to non-fluoridated water drank daily 1 litre of water from one of the bottles given to them. If symptoms occurred, the number of the bottle was sent to the attorney in a sealed envelope. Only after all the envelopes were received were they opened in the presence of witnesses to avoid any possibility of bias. These tests proved that fluoridated water caused the side effects we had identified, and the results have been published. After several months of careful study, the group began to grasp the full importance of the problem. The difficulty at first was that each symptom in itself could be interpreted as a normal illness. Only a combination of symptoms, e.g. colicky pains, small ulcers, and blurred vision, pointed in the true direction. So here is the list of most common complaints we could readily identify with the exposure to fluoridation: stomach and intestinal pains, mouth ulcers, excessive thirst, skin irritation and eczema, migraine-like headaches, visual disturbances, worsening of known allergic complaints, mental depression, stomatitis, joint pains, muscular weakness, and extreme tiredness. A definite relationship between the symptoms and fluoride in water was clearly established. The clinical results observed by Dr. Muhlenberg and his team confirmed the studies undertaken by Dr. Waldbott and Dr. Petraborg, and well as Dr. Ruben Feldman and Kossel B.S. MS, which also confirmed that fluoride in drinking water caused medical ailments within the community. According to Dr. Muhlenberg, in each of the many cases of adverse fluoride reaction identified, changing to non-fluoridated water cured the complaints. When fluoridated water was returned, the complaints returned. After several months, a new and disturbing complaint was added to these: joint pains. While the other complaints could be cured in 2 or 3 days with non-fluoridated water, the joint complaints took several weeks to some months of non-fluoridated water to clear up. Through continued study and research, Dr. Muhlenberg observed, "We now understand that what we have been studying is not an allergy for the fluoride ion as we had first thought, but an intoxication from the highly toxic fluorides that had been added to the water supplies. It is well known that sensitivity to poisons can vary from person to person, and that this variation is quite extensive. In allergy, an increased dose of the irritating substance will still only give symptoms, perhaps increased in severity, in those allergic to it. In a poison, a small dose will give complaints in the more sensitive persons. In the case of fluoride, research shows that to include about 5% of the population, with increasing doses, more and more people will fall ill, and when the dose is high enough, everyone will be ill, with perhaps the most sensitive persons already dead or dying. As a summary of our research, we are now convinced that fluoridation of the water supplies causes a low-grade intoxication of the whole population, with only the approximately 5% most sensitive persons showing acute symptoms. The whole population being subjected to low-grade poisoning means that their immune systems are constantly overtaxed. With all the other poisonous influences in our environment, this can hasten health calamities. It is in the light of this constant low-grade poisoning that the substantial evidence of increased cancer death rate due to fluoridation needs to be considered and understood. In conclusion, Dr. Muhlenberg stated under oath that it is my considered scientific opinion, and I speak in the name of my colleagues who joined in the research, that the fluoridation of water supplies gives a significant immunosuppression of the whole population subject to it, and is one of the important precursors of the civilization illnesses that are rampant in modern industrialized society. It is my best scientific judgment, made with a high degree of scientific certainty, that fluoridated drinking water is very dangerous to the health of those who drink it. Following publication of their research results, water fluoridation in Holland was discontinued in 1976. In a recent letter published in the Journal of Fluoride, Dr. Muhlenberg observed, as an 84-year-old physician with 54 years in medical practice, who also lived through the German occupation of Holland during World War II and saw what totalitarian thinking leads to in the end. When the fluoridating authorities finally began to realize that fluoridation was founded on a hill of sand, they will behave like little children when the incoming tide demolishes their seaside sand constructions. They will shut their eyes and protest, "No, this cannot be. Public health authorities should only be interested in promoting good health and preventing human suffering. Yet from their actions, they appear more concerned with adhering to erroneous dogmatic thinking and maintaining their own positions and power. Discussion and debate with fluoride promoters is useless and a waste of time. Just as happened in Holland and throughout most of Europe, authorities who try to suppress unwelcome facts about fluoridation will eventually be swept away in response to compelling evidence and massive public indignation." And now this seems to be from the perspective of the author of this, which makes a lot of sense to me. So he says, "It is lamentable that in 2013, so this was obviously in 2013, as Ireland holds the presidency of the Council of the European Union, that the Republic of Ireland, alone within Europe, continues to support the mass medication of its population using untested industrial chemicals that are known to cause harm to human health and the environment. Given this considerable amount of information available, there is no doubt but that the public health authorities, as well as the political establishment in Ireland, as well as in other few remaining countries that still support fluoridation, have utterly failed to undertake a proper medical or scientific due diligence to protect their citizens from unnecessary harm that may result from supporting what can only be described as a blunt totalitarian policy, mandating the mass medication of entire populations with untested chemicals being added to public drinking water." References provided upon request, as that's what he says at the end. So thank you for listening to me reading this article. I aim to get more practice in delivering articles, but hopefully my reading was understandable. So now, after reading that, I just was reading also this blurb of, there's a book by Paul Connett, PhD, James Beck, MD, PhD, and H.S. Micklem, and it is called The Case Against Fluoride, How Hazardous Waste Ends Up in Our Drinking Water and the Bad Science and Powerful Politics That Keep It There. And so I'll just read you the blurb of this book because I found it quite interesting as well. It says, when the US Public Health Service endorsed water fluoridation in 1950, there was little evidence of its safety. Now, 6 decades later, and after most countries have rejected the practice, more than 70% of Americans, as well as 200 million people worldwide, are drinking fluoridated water. The Center for Disease Control and the American Dental Association continue to promote it, and even mandatory statewide water fluoridation, despite increasing evidence that it is not only unnecessary, but potentially hazardous to human health. In this timely and important book, Dr. Paul Connett, Dr. James Beck, and Dr. H. Spedding Micklem take a new look at the science behind water fluoridation and argue that just because the dental and medical establishments endorse a public health measure doesn't mean it's safe. In the case of water fluoridation, the chemicals that go into the drinking water that more than 180 million people drink each day are not even pharmaceutical grade, but rather a hazardous waste product of the phosphate fertilizer industry. It is illegal to dump this waste into the sea or local surface water, and yet it is allowed in our drinking water. To make matters worse, this program receives no oversight from the Food and Drug Administration, and the Environmental Protection Agency takes no responsibility for the practice. And from an ethical standpoint, say the authors, water fluoridation is a bad medical practice. Individuals are being forced to take medication without their informed consent, there is no control over the dose, and no monitoring of possible side effects. At once painstakingly documented and also highly readable, the case against fluoride brings new research to light, including links between fluoride and harm to the brain, bones, and endocrine system, and argues that the evidence that fluoridation reduces tooth decay is surprisingly weak. Interesting. One review of this book states, the insanity of international water fluoridation is examined from every angle in this book. International law forbids dumping fluoride waste into the sea, but it is accepted in American drinking water. As stated in the toothpaste disclaimer above, the FDA officially considers fluoride to be a drug. This drug has never been approved by the FDA. Contaminating drinking water with fluoride can be most charitably characterized as an experiment which violates the Nuremberg Code prohibiting experimental human treatment without informed consent. China, India, Japan, and most of Europe do not fluoridate their water. Toward the end of the book, the authors pull out one of my all-time favorite quotes from the late Michael Crichton. Historically, the claim of consensus has been the first refuge of scoundrels. It is a way to avoid debate by claiming that the matter is already settled. The greatest scientists in history are great precisely because they broke with the consensus. There is no such thing as consensus science. If it is consensus, it isn't science. If it is science, it isn't consensus. Period. Thumbs up. So that's just a little bit of the book. I'm today I watched a documentary also about fluoridation in the US and how it came about, and all the bad side effects, and how it seemingly there was a study to say that it lessened cavities, but in that same study it only reduced cavities because the tooth had actually fallen out of the mouth, so there were less cavities recorded because the teeth weren't actually in the mouth. So that's the kind of science that we're basing it on. And they needed to get these scientific experiments of safety because the toxic waste industries needed a way to get rid of their toxic waste, and so they needed a way to prove that fluoride was safe, and so yeah, it was very interesting. Anyway, I'm probably not great at explaining the documentary. I can get the name and link it in the bio. And moving on, thank you for listening, by the way. I just thought to end, I will read out what the HSC, which is Ireland. The HSE is the Irish Health Authority. This is their frequently asked questions. So the question, why is fluoridation of water supplies carried out? And the HSE says, the fluoridation of piped public water supplies is a public health measure designed for the prevention and control of dental decay. The legal basis for fluoridation of public water supplies is set out in the Health Fluoridation of Water Supplies Act 1960 and the Fluoridation of Water Supplies Regulations 2007. The Health Fluoridation of Water Supplies Act 1960 provides for the Health Service Executive to arrange for the fluoridation of public water supplies to the public by sanitary authorities, now Irish Water. Part 2 of S142 places statutory obligations on sanitary authorities / Irish Water as agents for the HSE in respect of fluoridation of public water supplies. More information on fluoridation can be sourced in the FAQ section of the Irish Expert Body on Fluorides and Health's website. Okay, so that was their answer to that. I'm going to move down to more interesting questions that I found. It says, will there be a review of the fluoridation policy? And they say, the Department of Health keeps the policy of water fluoridation under constant review. This policy was reviewed by the Forum of Fluoridation, which reported in 2002. Since then, the expert body on fluorides and health has continued to monitor new research on fluoride-related issues. In the light of the work of the expert body and other international reviews, particularly that of the European Union, to which the department contributed, the department does not accept that there is a huge amount of scientific evidence stacking up against the safety and effectiveness of water fluoridation. Oh my God, they use the word safety and effectiveness. It's like whenever you say something's wrong with something, no, it's safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. It's like the buzzword that they use when something is highly questionable, and they just dismiss it by saying safe and effective. Okay, that's my rant over. So the Minister of State has stressed the importance of assessing health statistics on a regular basis to address any concerns that general health may be affected by fluoridation. As part of this ongoing work, 2 assessments are planned. Both will be carried out with a particular focus on the Irish context. 1, a review of evidence on the impact of water fluoridation at its current level on the health of the population and on the environment will be conducted by the Health Research Board on behalf of the Department of Health in 2014. 2. A review of general health debates is planned to be supported by a public health specialist. At present, the department is collaborating in a University College Cork-led research project, Fluoride and Caring for Children's Teeth, FACCT, which will specifically examine the oral health status of children and inform national policy. The study will consider the impact of changes on the oral health of children following policy decisions relating to toothpaste used by infants and young children made in 2002 and the reduction in the level of fluoridation in drinking water in 2007. It is focusing on 5-year-old and 12-year-old children. The HSC has released dental staff and is providing funding to support the study. Consideration is also being given by the Department of Health to a study on general and oral health findings in adults linked to the duration of exposure to fluoridated water as part of the Irish longitudinal study on aging. Fluoridation policy is dealt with on the Department of Health's website at this website. And they also say in here that there's no plans to stop fluoridating the water in Ireland. But it just seems that they're so focused on, they still need to carry out experiments to try and prove to themselves that fluoride is helpful for teeth. It's like they're so zoned in on teeth that they cannot seem to look at the rest of the child, like the other effects it could have on a child. It's like, no, let's just focus on the teeth. Anyway, so there you have it. That's a bit of stuff that I learnt today on fluoridation. I'm currently in Ireland, so I will be taking measures to try and cut it out as far as I can and drink water that's either distilled or from a company such as Evian, who create bottled water that doesn't have any fluoride in it. So yeah, there you have it. Thank you for listening to me. Hopefully you got something from that. See you later. Thanks.